Perfect. I believe we are live. Welcome everyone who just joined. We're just going to give it a couple more moments for the other attendees to be able to join. So just give us like 1 minute or so, and then we will get started. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to kick things off. Feel free to grab a water and whatnot throughout my intro. But good morning, afternoon, and evening, depending on where you are in the world. Today, we are hosting the second panel in our U.S. Ex-Military Careers webinar series, From the Frontline to Technology, Navigating the Transition. You can expect about an hour of panel discussion with a live Q&A as well throughout the conversation. My name is Kendall Barnett. I'm the business manager at Trust and Soda. My firm Soda is a B Corp certified business, which incorporated various community groups to essentially reach an underrepresented and diverse audience. So one of our groups, of course, is Ex-Military Careers. Feel free to check out our website, do a bit of research on us. That website is www.ex-militarycareers.com. And yeah, our goal is to bridge the gap from the military to the civilian world and all the careers that it has to offer. So with over 200,000 followers on LinkedIn, we host industry thought leadership events to support veteran employment initiatives. We want to make today's discussion as engaging as possible for our audience. So if you are in the audience and you have any questions for our panel throughout the webinar, please feel free to ask them in the side panel or in the Q&A section. And Lucy, our head of marketing, will make sure they get over to us, and then we get through as many as possible throughout the panel. Lastly, before we kick things off, please do note that this is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, where you can also access any of our previous webinars here moving forward. To start, I'd like to introduce you to our fabulous panel. But before I do, we'd also love to know more about our audience. So if you feel inclined, please do tell us what branch of the military you're coming out of, what positions you were targeting in the tech sector in the chat box. But yeah, now over to our panel. To start, do you guys all mind just giving us maybe like a 30-second whirlwind intro of who you are, your professional career so far, and maybe your favorite military moment? I'll start off with Matt.
Yeah, hey, good afternoon. Obviously, I'm Matt. I was in the Army for 8.5, almost 9 years, did a couple tours in Iraq. I have been involved in technology since I was 12 years old when I first started developing. So it was just inevitable that I was going to do it after the Army. I've held every title from developer to system administrator to system architect, software architect, pretty much everything. Favorite moment in the military? Oh, I don't know. Maybe getting out, honestly. Yeah, I'm very much happier being out than I was in, that's for sure. So it's a rough transition, but it's totally worth it.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Matt. All right, over to you, Josh.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Josh. I spent 7.5 years in the military. I also deployed to Iraq for 15 months. I was a little bit later into tech. I didn't actually start exploring tech till I got out of the military. I've held everything from junior developer up to manager, and somewhat everything in between. I'm more of a front end focus. My favorite moment in the military. Yeesh. I would probably say the end of basic, when you do like your the grog, you have to drink everything. And so I kind of felt like that was like my time for that camaraderie, and I actually felt like it was my first time in the military. I wasn't getting yelled at. So yeah, that was probably my favorite moment.
Love it. Thanks so much, Josh. All right, and over to you, Lori.
Hello, I'm Lori Sales. I am President CEO of Civility Management Solutions. and I am a United States Marine Corps veteran. And I would have to say that, I wasn't involved in tech at all, but my journey of transitioning from being a civilian to becoming a veteran and to now becoming a president CEO has been much of a challenge and a great journey, I would even add. But at the same time, I now get a chance to hire some technicians. So it's kind of cool. However, my favorite thing was being able to play volleyball and making it on the All Marine volleyball team. So I got a chance to take a break a couple of times out of the year to walk around and without a uniform. So that was kind of cool.
Very fun. Perfect. And Chris, why don't you bring us home here?
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris. I served in the Marine Corps for a couple of enlistments, went to Iraq. Similar to everyone else on the call, I've been in technology since I got out. I have, I started as a junior engineer, and I've moved on through the ranks, so to speak. I am now managing IT operations and DevOps for my company. My favorite military moment, I guess, would probably just be the quiet times, right? Hanging out with your buddies after work, or joking around in the shop in the downtime, right? Those are my best memories.
Yeah, it's the little things. Perfect. Well, thank you for that, Chris. We'll dive right in. I appreciate everyone introducing themselves. To start, Chris, I'm gonna pass the baton straight back over to you. I'd like to start by asking, how can military experience be tailored effectively for roles in the tech industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that obviously, if your experience in the military is transferable one-to-one to the job you're applying for in the civilian world, then that's simple, right? There's no tailoring, it just works. If they don't, I think what you need to do is look at your job posting, look at the type of roles that you're looking for, and find the similarities, find the relationships between what you have done and what job you're trying to find. When you do find those things, you can, I would say, understand what the hiring managers are looking for, and then fit your military experience around that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Almost tailoring, what might be softer skill sets or different aspects and areas of certain jobs that you had, and being able to then translate that into transferable skills that could be of value as a potential leader or individual contributor in some sense.
Exactly.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. And Josh, this question is going to be for you. What strategies can be employed to build confidence when transitioning from the military to civilian tech roles?
So I think the key is to know that what you did in the military is very valuable. I think the key is to communicate and translate that into terms that people in the civilian world can understand. And I think that's really like a balance of being able to flex your muscle. So I think you can kind of use that tool like to kind of emphasize in interviews the things that you did know or the things that you do know. So I think it's key to kind of emphasize your job and kind of illustrate how you communicate to the interviewer on the jobs you did do, like how you are able to kind of break down problems and you're able to communicate everything you need to communicate. And so it's best to think in terms of like, you're able to always arrive to meetings early. You're able to be organized. You're able to do process improvement. You can be detail oriented. You're an active listener. You're a great communicator. Like these are all things that are kind of innate in the military, but those are skills that's valuable that you can put to the forefront that can help you get a little bit further along in the process.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I almost feel like it's human nature to have a little bit of fear when you're jumping into anything new, right? And struggle to have that confidence that you are going to be able to succeed. But I like the way you broke that down as far as, you know, being able to take those smaller things and apply them and know that those things will get you to where you want to go as you are learning that new skill set. Perfect. Okay. So Lori, I'm going to ask this one to you, and anyone else feel free to chime in as well. But what is the difference between hard and soft skills? We talk a lot about this, in the recruitment world myself, right? Being able to write down your skills in your resume as far as what you've actually done in the job, as well as, you know, who are you as a person, and what sort of soft skills, personality traits, communication styles can you also bring to the table. So which ones would you recommend highlighting on your resume, if you are an applicant?
Well, if you're specifically talking about the soft skills, the hard skills are your, your actual skill, your talent, your capabilities, your actual hands-on work that you bring to the table. But on the soft skills side, it definitely, it's things that people should know about someone that they're bringing in that's a veteran. But in many cases, they don't think about it in this capacity. That you're a person that, is bringing a certain level of tenacity and resilience that the average person will not quickly be able to adapt to some of the things just because we've been mentally trained in that space to be able to adjust and pivot. But there are huge parts about who you are, where the added value to the employer gets. Somebody that can make quick judgments, based off of some of the teachings, again, that you've gotten from the military, knowing that a decision must be made, and what we got to do is make another decision now instead of having a meeting about it, which is one of the differences about corporate America and being in the tech field or any field prior to not prior to, but relative to being in the military. Because in the military, we make decisions and move. Whereas corporate America can drag something out for like a month or 2 months or 3 months. And so that's the added value of the soft skills that you bring is your teamwork efforts, your willingness to always win. Those are the biggest things that you need to not even just put on paper, but make sure you have it in your conversation with whomever you're talking to when you're looking for a job interview.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Chris, I'm curious if you have anything to add as well, being a hiring manager yourself and things that you look for on resumes as far as hard skills and soft skills are concerned, and how people are articulating that, in writing and having it come across in the resume.
Well, I think you stated it really well just now. It's how people articulate things, right? Whether in their written communication or in their verbal communication. Communication in itself is a soft skill, right? Knowing how to tailor what you're saying or what you're writing to the audience that it is intended for will get you a long way. In the military, it's easy to fall into lingo and jargon and potentially have a more casual way of speaking that would not necessarily lend itself well to maybe an all hands meeting or a meeting with an executive team, right? So understanding who your audience is and how to present to them, right? These are the types of soft skills that I would look for in an interview, in a candidate. The hard skills, like Lori said, they're what you know, right? If you're a JavaScript programmer, you know JavaScript. That's your hard skills, right? But a soft skill, aside from communication, would be something like, well, I don't know JavaScript, but I know how to write software. So if I need to go and pick up Python or JavaScript or C, I can just go and do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like that point about, having those kind of transferable skills. If you've learned one language, right, you can certainly learn another. Sure, it might take a bit of ramp up, right? But here's the things I've done in the past to mitigate, that taking too long or making sure that I'm still adding value in the interim to a company. Well, good. Okay, I believe next we have a poll, and I don't know that I covered polls with the audience. So I'll explain that now. Essentially, everyone will see a question on their screen. The question is, what are some of the challenges that you have faced when transitioning to the civilian life? And then you can just click whichever one you think applies best to you or your situation, or what resonates the most. And panel, we are going to talk through them. So our options are identity shift, employment, education, social integration, healthcare, financial adjustment, and family dynamics. Matt, I'd love to hear if any of these resonate, true to you, or what your experience was.
So honestly, I think overall, all of them in some way, shape, or form. For the most part, at least, right? I was fortunate enough that I was medically retired, so I still have TRICARE. So like healthcare is not a huge issue of mine, but I know a lot of people who got out and they have none. And so they're still struggling, trying to figure out, well, how do I get taken care of now? I think one of the biggest hurdles I had with this whole transition is just, in the Army, you were told to do where you had to be, when you had to be there, what you had to wear every step of the way. And life isn't like that outside, right? Am I supposed to wear a suit to an interview? Can I wear a t-shirt? I'm being a hiring manager now, I wear a t-shirt to every interview I conduct. But on the other side of that, can I still wear a t-shirt? No, probably not, right? There's so much that gets impacted. I've heard from lots of other people they're using stuff like life coaches to help teach you and help mentor you along those ways. I unfortunately didn't have much of anything, and I kind of struggled my way through at times. Um, but think that was probably one of my biggest hurdles is I actually had to think for myself versus being told where to be and when to be there.
Right. And did you find that empowering, scary? Like, what was, your both?
Both for sure, right? I was 30 something when I got out, and now I all of a sudden had to take care of myself, and I'm just like, wow, I'm kind of a little late to life to having to do this. So it was a little scary, but at the same point in time, fear is one of those things you can face it and run, or you can, rise up to the challenge that it brings you. So far I feel like it's worked out pretty well in my favor. But I'm sure there's setbacks along the way that I've probably caused by, making the wrong choice each step of the way too.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And Lori, I know, poll results are in. Lori, we'll hear from you. As we can see here, it looks like quite a mix here across identity shift, employment, social integration, and financial adjustment. Curious for you if any of those votes resonate with you as well, Lori.
It was definitely the employment, because, the whole jargon, right? It's the culture that you develop from being in the military and wearing the uniform that is the most challenging, no matter what you do, when you transition out and no matter where you go. And it's about making those adjustments. I think the huge value today is the internet, including the AI. I mean, it's just, I can't say it well enough that that's important for all the veterans to really spend time and just Google and just read and just study and listen to YouTubes or podcasts in order to make that adjustment a lot easier. Because when I got out, that was not there. I mean, I think I told the guys earlier, and it's worth repeating because it's just the truth. I don't know when I stopped saying I'm going to the head. And I was a woman in a professional environment wearing a suit, and people are like, when you go into the head, like, where are you going? With one young lady, I said, I'm going to the bathroom. And she said, well, can't you just say you're going to the bathroom? But someone had to bring it to my attention. I still don't know when I stopped. So just now making sure you fuel yourself with communication, as I heard Chris, I think it was mentioned earlier, that culture and the communication, no matter where you go, that is going to be one of the biggest challenges of coming out of the roughness and the toughness even that we have to have, especially as women that serve, because there's another level of us being tough that we had to get in gear for in order to deal with the men that were surrounding us every single day. I couldn't sit there and be little Miss Muffet and my Marines give me the respect that I need when I open my mouth, right? So, but I had to learn how to dial all of that back and get a little lilt in my voice when I talk, which I never do that one.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I appreciate that response, Lori, and I think that resonates with a lot of people, right? Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of times when you're shifting into the corporate culture and the corporate world, you do have to sometimes dial back who you are, right? And I think finding that happy medium of being who you are as an individual, right, and being secure in your own skin while also maintaining that level of professionalism or adapting to the environments you're in. You know, as individuals, we do also want to fit in a social regard, and feel welcomed and not like an outsider, like we've come from, you know, this completely different space. So curious, as well for you, Matt, you know, what steps can veterans take to adapt to the corporate culture and terminology within the tech sector? Because obviously there's kind of that vast transition, right, from being a veteran, as Lori mentioned, right, having certain terms and slang, and then, you know, you do still see that in the tech sector, but a much very different regard.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lori hit the nail right on the head. Biggest thing I've always experienced was just the struggle between the way you acted in the Army and the way you can act in corporate America are just two completely different things. Um, you know, back in the Army, I could yell at people. And that was every part of every day of my life. That drill sergeant mentality. And no, I was never a drill sergeant, but it's still the bulldog mentality when you're in combat arms that you just have to be. And when you show up in corporate America and you start yelling at people, you get in trouble real quick. And so it's really just taking a step back and trying to reevaluate how you approach situations um, that are confrontational, because they're going to happen everywhere you go. Even still, like today, for instance, if I had to write a message to somebody, like I'm going to sit back and I'm going to reread it a couple times, and I might send it over to some of my peers and say, hey, can you proofread this and make sure like I'm not just being a complete jerk? Because there are times I feel like being a complete jerk, and that's just kind of been ingrained in me, and I have to really change how I am in order to fit into, the corporate world. As far as terminology goes, you know, I kind of left a lot of the terminology behind from the Army days. Like, I'm not going to go up to somebody and say, hey, man, you know what an M109 Alpha 6 is? No, well, that was my Paladin I shot a lot of artillery on. Because somebody really, they might think it's cool, but I don't think anybody really cares to those extents. And the tech world is nothing but a whole bunch of different acronyms now. What's a CISSP? What's a Security Plus? What are all these things? We've mentioned JavaScript. Like, what's JavaScript? I can't tell you how many people I know thought that was Java as well. Like, that's a completely different thing. So it's just a whole group of different terminology. And if it's something you need to know, then I think the goal is, go learn it. You're gonna see it on every job application or requisition that comes out. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we touched on this briefly, but and I guess anyone can answer this, but as you mentioned, right, there's a lot of acronyms, there's a lot of things you can throw around or say and whatnot. And I know, as hiring managers, I think, Chris, the last time you and I spoke, you had mentioned this, right? Making sure that what you're putting on your resume and what you're saying, you have skills in, that it's something you're actually confident in. Can you maybe elaborate on that thought? I think it's interesting, and I think a lot of people actually aren't aware of it, right? It's almost like, if I've touched it, why wouldn't I put it on my resume? Because I want to show as much skills as I have. But of course, as we know, sometimes less is more, right?
Yeah, yeah. Listen, as a hiring manager, especially in today's climate where you've got thousands of layoffs from these big tech companies, when I post a role, I get hundreds of applicants, right? And if I'm looking at a resume that's 4 pages long because somebody has listed every single thing that he or she has ever encountered in their professional career, it's going to get missed, and most likely I'm not going to pay much attention to that resume because it's too long. Like, look, my time is valuable to me and I need to go and see the most important things, right? So as I said earlier, right, when you're looking at a role, instead of just saying, okay, well, I do 30% of those things, I'll just add those and then some others onto my resume and they'll be super impressed, right? You need to look at what that role is asking for and then focus and highlight those things that that company is hiring. If I'm hiring a Python developer or a security engineer, I really don't care if they know databases or any number of technology that's somewhat irrelevant, right? Down the line, maybe there's a moment where that makes a difference to me. But initially, when I'm reviewing resumes, just parrot back my job description to me, and I'm more likely to advance you in the process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think too, and Matt, I'll pop this back over to you because I think you've got some good comments on this one as well. But I think, sometimes less is more in the sense of applying. A lot of times when I talk to candidates, I'm like, look through the job description. If it's something you're actually really excited about, go through and have a look at, okay, what are they looking for? What have I actually done? What did I maybe originally leave off my resume that I didn't think was super relevant, but could be relevant to this role, right? And hand tailoring that way, because I think, as you said, right, people do still read resumes, right? And a lot of times they are going directly to hiring managers who are going to read that line by line, opposed to just maybe, someone like myself who's not as tech savvy, who might be looking more for keywords, right? There's kind of a time and a place and a balance for that. Matt, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think just somewhere along those same lines, if the more you put on there, the more I can ask questions about, right? So if you put on there that you're a C developer, for instance, and you haven't touched C in 12 years, it's fair game. I can go ahead and ask you C questions if I want, and I hope you better answer, right? So even if my job's C# and I don't even care if you know C, you put it on there, I get to ask. So it almost protects yourself as well, to kind of limit what you're putting on there for topics, ideas, or whatever. Because anything and everything that's on that resume is fair game for me.
I think that's a really good point too. That's amazing point, right? If you put something on your resume and I ask a question about it and you are unable to answer that question, right? That doesn't only tell me that you don't know about the thing that you put on your resume, it tells me that there might be a lack of integrity there. And that's not the type of person that I'm going to want on my team, right? And again, right, with the number of candidates that I get, I can afford to have my red lines be early and often, right? If you cross that red line, I end the interview and that's it, right? Just because you thought maybe it would look better on your resume, it might not if you can't speak to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. When I talk to candidates, I always recommend, especially if I see a lot of languages, because I do agree, right? Depending on your years of experience in the field, you might be a polyglot, right? You might have worked in a number of different programming languages, and yeah, you're a little rusty, but give me a few hours, right? And I could be back in live and complete a programming challenge. In that case, that's totally fine. But I always recommend, if you wouldn't rank yourself a 7 or higher in that technology or whatnot, right? Then think twice about putting it on there, right? Or if you're going to mention it in what regard you leveraged it, right? So then that way, if there's a question about, say, their experience in C, in that moment, we can kind of say, okay, well, this is how I used it. I don't necessarily know X, Y, and Z. I'm sure I could learn. Josh, I see your hand up. I'd love to hear from you on this one.
Yeah, I kind of got 2 points. So I kind of have like an analogy. So I like to think in analogies. So to me, it's the equivalent of saying you've been deployed, right? And a person that you're talking to say, I've been deployed too. You ask them a question about the deployment and they don't know how to, they're kind of fuzzy with the answers. It's kind of like, you know what? I don't think you was really deployed. And so it's kind of the same thing. Like you can't speak to something saying that you did something and you can't really speak to it in detail like a person actually been through it. So to me, I feel like that's kind of important. I thought I should just kind of bring that home. And I guess I got a question for Matt and Chris. Kind of going with the polyglot scenario, do you think it's best to learn one language, or do you think it's best to be a jack of all trades?
Depends on what you're targeting.
Yeah, I think that's very much the case. It depends on what you're targeting, and ultimately, if you can demonstrate an ability to learn and expand your skills quickly, I'm most likely more interested in that than interested if you know the exact language that I'm looking for.
I think just to add on to that and everything, from my perspective, pick a language, start with it. You're gonna have to learn more. It's inevitable. I started off as a desktop application developer writing in strictly Java. And that same job, I had to turn around and start writing in C++. A year later, I was now a full stack web developer in C#, JavaScript, and working with SQL databases and everything else. I'd never touched any of it before. And I think we'll kind of touch on some of these other questions later for sure, but start with something that's prevalent in today's market and go from there.
Yeah, I'm curious, Josh, do you feel that same sentiment as well? Or I know on my side, it does depend highly on the hiring manager and on the hiring organization. I have some that are like, I need a Python developer through and through. And I have others who are like, I just need a really strong engineer who thinks, X, Y, and Z way. And here's some questions you could ask to see if, they're knowledgeable in that area, because the code, depending on what they're using, can come. So curious as to your thoughts as well.
So I guess based off my experience, what I kind of gathered, like I think from my perspective, language doesn't really matter. To me, if you really understand the concepts behind the logic, I think you can pick up the language anytime. It's like if you know how to communicate with the server and talk back and forth, it doesn't matter whether you're using Java, JavaScript, Node.js. It's just you need to understand that you need to be able to pull something off that server. You need to read a file. You need to print a file. Like it's all done in different ways. If you can understand that concept, the language that you use really doesn't matter. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, I think too, and I'm sure you all are familiar, it probably depends on the level as well, right? If you have somebody coming in at that principal staff level and you need them to hit the ground running and be able to advise people on a specific language and area, then that's going to look a little different than, a mid-level or senior who's going to be contributing, and we can give them a month or two to, get caught up on what that code base looks like.
Right. Well, I just say if you know the concepts, it's easy to understand the language by going and read the documentation, right? So it's as long as you understand the concepts, you can learn the documentation anytime.
Absolutely. Well, good. I know I just went off on a a tangent there, but I appreciate everybody's insights. It was really cool to hear. Lori, I'm going to pass one over to you because I know your background's a little bit different, not as tech focused, but of course a female CEO and leader nonetheless. So as a hiring manager yourself, I imagine you see a number of different profiles and skill sets for applicants on a daily basis. Are there any specific ways that you would recommend ex-military candidates can differentiate themselves from applicants? Anything specific that they should note or put on their background to potentially get them a leg up? As Chris mentioned, right, he's seeing 100 applicants, at a time. So we want to make sure we help our community kind of sort through that and sift through that noise.
And I'm gonna start off with this. One great thing about joining and being in the military, you come out as a leader. So I'm such a leader now. I got enough staff. I don't look at resumes. I got staff that are hiring managers that per se like this, but nonetheless, I have weekly conversations with my team and I get feedback from them. And for me, if I was to talk about it out the gate, the differentiator is you as a veteran. You are bringing, especially those soft skills, but you're bringing soft skills and you're bringing a mindset that totally separates you out from the average candidate that has never touched the United States military. So it's just a way of thinking. And then, I like the idea of people looking for jobs that they're going to love. It's not about the financial scenario. You have to make sure that you put your focus on that, because in the end, if you can get a job, which is available out there for you, that you will do without them paying you, that's when you've landed in your sweet spot. And being willing to take the challenge of doing without having less than for a period of time, the financial strain, because I definitely did that. My first job out of Marine Corps, $17,000 a year. Now, that was quite a while ago, but still, that was no money even then. But you can't compare it to where I'm at today, right? From receptionist to president CEO. So this is a night day difference. So taking yourself and knowing that I'm out of the military, I have great strengths, I'm confident in myself. Know that when you go in there, it's not even just so much about them interviewing you to select you, but you need to figure out whether or not you want to select them. Because in the end, you bring so much more value that they are not going to even tap into until you're in there, that you already know that you do and that you have to bring, and the value to the overall team. We're team players. We have teamwork in our blood. You know, we survive, and we're the greatest in the entire world because of the teamwork of how we depend on each other to make things happen to survive in the military. And you bring that to whomever gets to be fortunate enough to have the opportunity to offer you a job. So that would be my thoughts on that. Make sure you remember you're a military veteran, and not cockily, you know, it's not trying to be too cocky, but you do want to be able to make it clear about, you know, knowing who you are when you walk into the room.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Josh, I wanted to point this one towards you. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What strategies can be employed to manage emotions and mindset during the transition from military to civilian tech roles? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Got a lot
There we
going on.
go.
My bad. So emotions and mindset is definitely important in the interview process, right? You can't really go into an interview, you know, depressed or kind of sad or even angry, or like you kind of, it's kind of a performance. So you have to do whatever you have to do to put your best self forward, whether it's going to therapy or getting exercise, or trying to keep in mind that it's a process and don't take it personal, right? It's easy to sit here and look at, you know, this person sitting in front that you don't know, and they may look at you and you may take it like, well, this person's just thinking I'm just chopped liver. And it's like, this person may be going through their own process, like trying to figure out, you know, the next thing that's happening. They may have a meeting, and may not be anything related to you, but you would take it personal. So it's best to kind of take it all in stride. Don't take it personal, and just know, if you can find support groups and perhaps meetups that can kind of help you know that you're not alone in this process, and somebody you can probably perhaps vent to, you know, maybe scream at that you need, whatever you need to do to kind of help you get through the process. But it's going to be an emotional, it's going to happen. You're going to be emotional. You're going to be sad. You're going to be depressed. It's a part of the process. But at the end of it, you won't be able to know when you finally get an offer, like when you about to get tears in your eyes because you finally made it. You won't be able to go through that if you didn't go through all the downsides of it. So yeah, just take it all in stride.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I remember when I first got into leadership, a previous director of mine had said something along the lines of, you know, nobody, essentially the worst thing that somebody has gone through is what they only know to be, you know, the worst thing. So I think, you know, in the case of veterans, a lot of times, you know, you all have seen things or been involved in things that I think can cause a lot of trauma, right? And bring out, I think, a lot of hardship and having to get over that, right? And move forward or find a way forward with that. And I think, you know, then transitioning into the civilian world, right? And then having somebody complain about something that might seem so minuscule might be really challenging for a lot of individuals as they're making that transition. So I kind of, you know, appreciate that sentiment that you said about, you know, doing things and you know, that are going to benefit you and put you in a better mental place and focusing on yourself and being conscious that, you know, others might not be able to relate as much as well. Anyone else have anything they want to add? Any tips or tricks around that? Perfect. We'll cruise right along. As for my next question, what are the fundamentals of conquering the recruitment process? Josh, I have you on this one as well. Curious to hear your thoughts.
Sure. So the recruitment process is unlike any other industry, if you ask me. It varies from company to company. The questions they may ask you may vary from topic to topic. Um, and I think I think the first thing I would say is to apply to as many jobs as possible. I think it personally it's a numbers game and be honest. Like I said, like we were saying earlier, you got to be honest. There's no better way to break trust than to say you know something you really don't. Like full stop. You can't just sit here and say I know something, you turn around and you don't know it. And so it's also to sit here and think about the mental state and take a mental note and make sure that you know, kind of like what Chris was saying, that you know what you are saying on your resume through and through, right? It's important. And also use your recruiter. Your recruiter is your friend. They're the person that you should ask any kind of questions. They can kind of get an inside track. So ask them for helps and tips and tricks about like the next interview process, like what kind of questions they may be asking, what kind of topics they may be covering. They'll kind of give you the added advantage because the next person the recruiter may talk to may not ask that question. So this recruiter may be like, well, this person asked some questions. They seem like they'd be more intuitive to the job. That may help you out. So use that to your advantage. That would be some of the fundamentals to the recruitment process.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm curious as well. I saw a comment in there talking about industry certifications and them, sometimes being key when, leveraging that on your resume or being able to get your foot in the door places or even get your foot in the world of technology. Curious for you all, I know the backgrounds can be different, whether it's IT or software or whatnot. Were there any certifications that either you all got or any sort of training programs, anything like that that you did in your career? And if so, could you maybe touch on, the path that you took? I know some are software, some more IT, DevOps and whatnot.
Yeah, I can go ahead and jump on here. I have a couple myself. So when I first got out of college, especially, I took a job as a software developer for DoD land. My second contract I was working on required that all developers have I don't remember the DoD regulation requirement or whatever, but basically I had to have my Security Plus certification or higher in order to be a developer on the system. So that's a certification I still had because the job required it. Without it, I was not allowed to work on that contract as a developer. Typically, that's a cert you'd see like a system administrator have or entry level cybersecurity person have. But because I had admin rights to servers and systems, I had to have those as well, or I had to meet the same criteria. Going forward from there, I got my Scrum Master certification at the same job. Would I recommend it? Not really. It's a 15-minute certification test after a couple day long course, and it's a check the block piece of paper that I let expire and I will probably never renew because it's just not worth it in my opinion.
But because you got it and got your foot in the door elsewhere, right, Matt?
No. I actually never actually needed it for a job. I think maybe if you were actual Scrum Master, maybe they might care, but it's a walk in the park, in my opinion. If you've lived the Agile Scrum world for even a week, you can probably pass the certification test. It's that easy. Other than that, I have AWS certs as well. I think those are helpful. They get you looked at some, right? Cloud is the big thing that everybody's ranting and raving about for years now. I didn't have that when I was in DoD land because we didn't even have the cloud to work with. But ever since I left DoD behind, everything has been AWS this, AWS that. Some companies are on the Azure platform. I haven't actually worked for one, so everything luckily that I've done is targeted to stuff I already know, thankfully. But it's that stuff that really sets you apart from the candidate who hasn't taken the time to learn what is the cloud? How do I use it?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think allowing you to help with that transition from DoD or maybe one of those sectors that's a little bit more security focused, right? Or private, in which case, you might not have exposure to those public clouds because, for obvious reasons, right? But I think for data security reasons, but at the end of the day, then being able to say, well, I got this exposure in that way can be very helpful. I do know, that's a common path based on the conversations I've had, right? Going into the DoD space or anything kind of within like security and whatnot. And I always recommend to candidates who are veterans, you know, who are trying to make that transition and struggling to find something and maybe one of the other sectors that they're more passionate about. It's like, you know, doing things like getting that security clearance, getting your foot in the door somewhere and just getting the experience, right? Getting the chance to code on an actual project in a professional setting is still one step closer than you were before, right? So maybe taking those opportunities, then getting those cloud certifications, then marketing yourself out to one of those other industries that doesn't have as natural of a transition. Chris, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think we have to be very careful with certifications. There's a lot of value in them. Like Matt said, you know, if you're looking for DoD jobs, they require specific certifications, right? In other cases, you might go through an entire certification process and that doesn't add anything to you. You know, I hold a number of certifications myself because those specific certifications brought value to me in my career in some way, whether that makes, you know, the company that I'm working for, you know, for our private equity and our board requirements, right? They look and they say, okay, you have somebody who holds a CISM or a CISSP, and they're responsible for cybersecurity operations. Okay, we're happy with that, right? So that enables me to advance my career. On the other hand, if you're just breaking into cloud development, DevOps, something like that, right? I wouldn't necessarily recommend an AWS cert or an Azure cert if you can get more of a platform agnostic cloud cert, right? Because when it comes down to it, the primary clouds are all based on very similar principles, right? So if I'm looking for a senior and I want to know that they're, you know, strong AWS, they have strong AWS knowledge, I might be looking for their AWS certs, right? But if I'm looking for, you know, a more junior role, but they need to have some cloud experience, the AWS cert's not necessarily going to do it for me because that just tells me that they were able to study for a test and pass it, not that they have applied knowledge of cloud concepts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Almost like, okay, what have you done hands-on with it? The certification's nice, but have you actually done something in a professional setting? Lori, I saw your hand go up. I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in on this because this is where my program managers do get back to me on those challenges. Now, you know, we do government contracting predominantly, federal government, and it's about those certifications if it's technology. And they want it to be the most current. So, you know, one thing that's great about being, you know, people that serve in the military is that we're accustomed to training and consistent training and constant training. So it becomes, you know, muscle memory, right? So that doesn't change, especially in the area of technology. If that's your heart's desire to be in that field, you have to consider yourself a consistent learner and continuous learner and constantly staying on top of those, because not just DoD, you know, some of the positions that we've looked at, they're not DoD, they're in the civilian agencies, but there's still the requirement of, you know, those certifications. As an advisor on my alumni school, university, which is an adult training, actually in the military veterans community, they're really looking at how they're attracting in the students now. They're specifically about technology. It's not about the 4-year degree. The focus is more about making sure that they have the minds there and the professors there to give the knowledge in these areas of certification so that people can go and grow in the field of technology.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm gonna switch over, I think, to a different topic now. Josh, I'm curious to hear, you know, I'm conscious that setbacks are, you know, inevitable, right? They're gonna happen at some point along one's career or along their journey in life. So I'm curious, what would be your best piece of advice for a candidate who's struggling to deal with rejection? And at that same token, we have another poll. So we'll post that for people to think about. Please do, you know, answer for us. How do you deal with rejection? That should be popping up here in a moment. But Josh, over to you. You know, curious to hear your take on that. What would your best piece of advice be for a candidate struggling to deal with rejection?
So I kind of all thought about it like this, right? I was having a conversation with one of my buddies, and we kind of equated to looking for work as kind of like online dating, right? You make a profile, you search, and you kind of scroll through the job that you want. You reach out to the ones in hopes that they're gonna reach back. Hopefully, they do reach back, and kind of like once you meet up, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, right? So if that's the case, you kind of have to really kind of take it in stride, right? You kind of sit here and take the rejection, whether it's however the outcome is, you got to take it in stride. You can't just sit here and know if you had a bad date or a bad interaction. You can't just dwell on it. You gotta have a short memory and keep pushing forward. And so I looked at it like that, like it's a process, right? Even if you're dating, you won't be the same person dating on the first date if you would dating the 20th person or the 50th person. So you have to take whatever experience you have with that particular situation with that job application and pull from it what you got from it and move on to the next one, right? If it doesn't work out, if you got notes, if something they asked and you didn't know, write the notes down and figure out how to answer that question and try to move that to the next one. And understand it's a process. And going from 1 to 5 to 20 to 50, you won't be the same person, and it'll be worth it in the end.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, as somebody, obviously, I've been in recruitment for quite some time. I've seen some of the best engineers, right, best leaders get passed on for a job for one reason or another. So, I think it can feel a bit daunting when you're making that initial transition. It's like, the world's against me. I'm never going to get into the industry that I want. But I do think it's important for our audience to know that, right, that they're not alone in that sense. And I do think I forget who I spoke to about this previously, but being able to take on feedback, or if you come out of an interview, right, and it just felt a little off, or you feel like you could have done better or answered a question better, sending a follow-up email to that recruiter, to that person whoever you interviewed with, and saying, hey, I self-reflected, I just looked this up, and I probably would have answered this question X, Y, and Z had I known. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And small things like that, showing that kind of self-accountability and being able to answer those questions, I think can always go a long way. And on the flip side of that coin, right, being conscious, I've also seen people get defensive about feedback. And what I always say is it's never personal, right? Like at the end of the day, if somebody for one reason or another doesn't think you're a fit, just know that you're a fit for 100 more companies, and you probably don't want to be working for an employer, right, who doesn't feel 100% in alignment with you. You want to be excited about that opportunity. Perfect. All right, let's look at this poll here. So here we go. Some of the answers here, it looks like dealing with rejecting. So reflecting on what went wrong and learning from it. So I think, we both just touched on that. You probably more gracefully than I, Josh. And seeking advice from your support network. I think that's super important as well. Being able to, say, hey, do you have any feedback as to, why I was passed on, asking your recruiter and whatnot, and trying to just better identify, is there anywhere, that I could improve on, even if you disagree, taking that and trying to apply it, or talking to your network and asking them how to overcome it. Having mentors is huge. And then badly, which I think we can all resonate with. Sometimes, it just feels like the world's against you, and it's a tougher day than others, and you wake up tomorrow and you try again, right?
A true representation of people in the military. The majority of people are glad to be there, but there's that small percentage that's like, I can't wait to get out of this uniform. I thought that was great.
Exactly. Well, good. Okay. I'm going to pivot again. So why is it important to tailor make your resume to fit a specific job application? Conscious that, as you know, Lori, we have, both public and private sectors, and, different formatting and things that people look for. Can you maybe walk me through, why that is important, and tips and tricks that people should know?
And I'm going to make it quick to let the other guys jump in, but I will say this, that it shows that you put in the effort. That in itself is a first impression to whoever's reading the resume. If I can look at it and read what I'm looking for because you have pulled out keywords from the job description that was posted, or you were referencing something that you saw even off the website, and you blend that in with your response, automatically you're not going to get the turn down. They're going to continue to read because they're reading something that of course will interest them. So I would certainly say that that's the biggest differentiator of utilizing that task, I should say skill, about getting a job.
Absolutely. Perfect. And what qualities do tech leaders typically look for in ideal candidates during interviews? I think we've kind of touched on this briefly, but Chris, I'm gonna pass this one over to you. Can you maybe give me a few things that you look for?
Yeah, I think it's important, obviously, to have the technical proficiency for the role that you're applying for. But beyond that, the ability to present yourself and your work in a way that is parsable for me, right? I am highly technical. I understand a lot of things, but I talk to a lot of people, right? I need to be able to get the elevator pitch, so to speak, from you in the interview, even in the resume. So that goes into the soft skills, right? So this ability to communicate. Communication is critically important. Even if you think you're going to be an individual contributor and you're never going to talk to a customer or an end user or an executive or anything like that, it's important to be able to communicate just amongst your team members, right? Not everybody is on the same level, so being able to present yourself well, and I don't mean visually, but yourself overall, presenting yourself well is important. I also look for this ability to learn, to pick things up, right? We talked about certifications a bit, and I tend to lean on the side of they're good to see on people's resumes, but I'm looking at generally more senior candidates who their experience is really going to speak to me less than their certifications. But if I see somebody who has a progression of learning on their resume, illustrated by I started with the let's use the cloud, the AWS example, right? I started with the general cloud operations certificate. Not before anybody asks, I don't know if there is one, right? This is a contrived example, so don't hold me to this. You start, if I see somebody started with a basic cloud certificate on their resume, and then they've progressed, then they learned Azure, then they have a GCP, and then now they're a, AWS certified DevOps engineer, right? I'm like, okay, this person really cares about what they're learning, and that speaks to me that if I give them a task for which they might not have the level of technical proficiency or familiarity, they will pick it up. They will find a way to complete it.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I think you bring up fabulous points. And I'm conscious of time here too, so because I want to hear the answer to all of your last question, but around communication, I think it goes without saying that as leaders, a lot of time you're going to tap the person who, takes that sort of initiative in leading conversations, who takes the initiative in and interest in learning, and who can effectively communicate across team, right? So I think if you can refine that, even if it's not natural to you, obviously, clearly, I'm on a panel right now. I can talk until the cows come home. But I don't think that's necessarily everyone, but some of my best leaders are the most quiet people in the room, right? The active listeners who are then able to translate that back. And I think that's their communication style. But when they speak, you listen. So I think, for new people who are trying to get their bearings and understanding what that means, being able to enter a team and know how to communicate effectively and I think build morale in this team sort of environment. A lot of times you'll get opportunities or experiences that you might not have before. Conscious of time. So to wrap it all up and bring it home, and bear with me because we might run a few minutes over, but I definitely think the audience would love to hear this from you. And I'm going to ask everyone. So what was the best piece of advice that you received when you were making the transition out of the military? I'll start with you, Matt. Why don't you kick us off?
I honestly don't think I received much of any real good advice, to be entirely real. The advice I got was very troubling, honestly. The Army's was kind of rehab for some people. So I got some bad advice when I was going on my way out the door, and I was like, yep, I'm not going to listen to any of you. But if I were to give advice, and you're transitioning, your goal is to work into IT. My biggest piece of advice is to figure out what part of IT, which sector you want to work on, which one are you actually passionate about, and stick with just that. Don't try to branch out all over the place, especially not at first, because there's too much to learn. So figure out what your passion is and go from there.
I like that. Okay, good. And over to you, Josh.
So a piece of advice I got was going through the process, you're going to feel like you don't have control of your life. Realize that you do, and that take agency, which means take action, and that will help you know that you do have control of your life. Even though you're putting yourself out there and people may be telling you no, you may feel like that's out of your control, but continue to apply and do the things that you can do to show that you can control your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Control the things you can control. I think setting, goals, especially when you're looking for jobs, right? I'm going to apply to 5 market center roles I'm excited about, or companies, or they're not posted, but I know I really am interested in here. So I'm going to find their TA person and try to connect with them on LinkedIn. Those sort of small steps on a daily basis can a lot of times, I think lead to some progressive wins. I like that a lot. Okay, perfect. And Lori?
Like Matt, I wasn't giving any advice whatsoever. Uh, like never ever. But what I will give in advice would be this. Remember who you are, remember what you've done, remember what you've accomplished, and no matter whether they understand it or not, it will never change who you are. That is the real strength that you bring to any team that gets a chance to have you. That's my advice to give.
I appreciate it. Very well said, Lori. And Chris, last but not least, bring us home here. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm the same. I didn't receive any good advice when I got out. It was more of a, hey, see you later. Don't let the door hit you on the backside. So I will echo Lori and Matt, right? Find your passion. Don't try to do everything. Don't just pick something either, right? Experiment. Find something that works with you, works for you. I love what I do. And so the fact that I get paid to do it, and paid pretty well, is amazing, right? But I wouldn't have gotten to where I am if I didn't love what I do. So experiment, but find your passion, and yeah, we all need a paycheck. We have to make money. We have to pay our bills. So get a job and still continue to look for your passion, right? It takes time. It takes effort. It's not going to be handed to you. It's not going to be easy, but you just did a whole lot of stuff that was not easy, and it took effort, and you did it. So keep doing it.
I gotta jump in real quick. You know what advice they gave us all? Aren't you re-enlisting?
Mm-hmm.
Come back one more time. Yeah. Well, good. I appreciate all of your time. I know we've ran a few minutes over, so I appreciate everyone staying on. That is about it from us. So thank you, to our audience for sharing your morning, evening, or lunchtime with us. Thank you to our speakers for sharing your insights. And, for everyone's participation. By and large, it was really wonderful to hear from you all. We hope that you can join us for our next webinar. To those who wish to continue the discussion further, please do follow our community on social media. We actively post about the panels that we are hosting, and would love to see you again and hear your thoughts. Or feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn if you hope to get involved with Ex-Military Careers. I do want to note we're often looking for companies to help sponsor with in-person panel events just like this, but live in a city near you. I love a good excuse for a flight, so let me know where you're based, and we'll be on over with some panelists for you. We're also looking for future panelists, both local, for on-site panels, as well as 100% remote. I know this panel's based all over, so feel free, if you are in leadership and want to get involved, to reach out to me in that regard. As well as hiring managers. If you actively work to hire veterans, if you want to know how to better, get involved in hiring veterans, again, please do reach out. We love to facilitate introductions for our veteran community and making sure, we're doing all we can to get them in the door. So yeah, to find out more about our ex-military careers, visit our website at www.ex-militarycareers.com to chat more. But until then, I will see you all next time. And yeah, thanks so much again for your time, guys. We do appreciate it.